The central command of the Galactic Military Academy thrummed with controlled urgency. Monitors lit the observation hall with feeds from Training Sector 7, where 2 human cadets, Elsa Reeves and James Chin, were running a simulation meant only for the institution's elite. General Vax Thor, a towering Krillian in crystalline armor, stood with 6 arms folded, his attention fixed on the display. Commander Shelfrest's tentacles twitched with a mix of skepticism and concern. This scenario had been built to break the strongest candidates. On the screen, Elsa vaulted a plasma barrier with predatory ease despite a training field set to 4G. James slipped beneath automated pulse fire with reflexes that forced the monitoring arrays to recalibrate. Reports flowed in, time inside the sector, vitals, stress markers, and the readouts surprised every specialist watching. Vax Thor had commanded campaigns across 12 sectors, led forces through the Andromeda incursion, and supervised training for 73 species. He had never witnessed anything like this. The human pair moved through each scenario, Alpha through Gamma, with an economy of motion that read like instinct. In a simulated urban disaster, collapsing infrastructure, civilians in peril, superior enemy firepower, and a ticking nuclear countdown were expected to break most species. The Krillians might charge, the Vexorans would compute for hours. Elsa did neither. She ran toward the heart of chaos, turning rubble into ramps and debris into weapons, dragging 3 holographic civilians clear while neutralizing hostile positions with brutal practicality. When a damaged hover vehicle threatened to detonate the simulated device, she redirected it to shield the blast, reducing the radius and saving lives. Time elapsed, minutes where the Academy expected hours. James entered a 0G combat maze designed to disorient species anchored to one direction of gravity. Where cadets normally vomited or stalled, James spun off walls and ceilings with a dancer's precision, slipping through micro-gaps between plasma shots by anticipating trajectories rather than reacting. Observers muttered that human biology shouldn't be adapted to such extremes. Earth's gravity was fixed, but the data suggested an evolutionary flexibility honed on a harsh, unforgiving homeworld. The observation room's tone shifted from doubt to stunned curiosity. 2 newly admitted humans were reframing assumptions about biological limits and combat capacity. Their vitals did not crash, their decisions were efficient and fierce. The Academy's long-held axioms about training averages and expected capabilities suddenly looked incomplete. They were not merely exceptional cadets. Their presence implied a broader human adaptability forged by a death world called Earth. They were rewriting the margins of what the Coalition considered possible. The Crucible's aftermath left the observation gallery unsettled and buzzing with difficult questions. General Vax Thor paced while officers reviewed replayed sequences frame by frame. The same mission that should have required days had been completed in hours with no casualties. For 10,000 years the Academy had built training doctrine on perceived biological ceilings, optimizing curricula for average endurance, reaction times and cognitive thresholds, then training toward the exceptional. Now 2 humans had smashed that model. Medical teams and psychologists moved quickly, searching for illicit enhancements, exotic stimulants, or genetic modification that might explain the performance. Tests returned negative. The human's physiology displayed no artificial augmentations. Instead, they exhibited traits consistent with sustained, high-stress survival, rapid recovery, improvisational problem-solving, adaptable motor patterns, and an unusual capacity to convert environmental hazards into tactical advantages. Analysts concluded the cadets' edge was emergent, not engineered, an expression of evolutionary pressure from Earth's violent environments. Simulations were rewound, dissected, and rerun. Engineers who designed the 0G maze debated structural tweaks. Tacticians argued that the Coalition's predictive models, built around expected responses, would fail when facing opponents who invented tactics on the fly. The political consequences were immediate. Command channels lit up beyond the Academy. Allied commands asked whether human units should be reclassified, and whether existing occupation plans needed revision to account for irregular, improvisational defense. Propaganda officers worried about recordings of the test being repurposed. Images of rubble turned into shelter or weapon could embolden resistance movements across occupied systems. Meanwhile, the humans themselves remained almost indifferent to the spectacle. Elsa and James walked to medical evaluation without fanfare, not celebrating and not seeking glory. Their silence cut against the nervy excitement around them. They did not perform for cameras. Instead, they looked focused and ready for more work, which unnerved the senior officers more than their physical feats. Vax Thor's private words to his command crystallized a new thesis. The Academy had been training for a galaxy it thought it knew, but these cadets were teaching the Coalition about the galaxy it would face. Strategic planners began sketching scenarios where human squads would be prioritized for chaotic theaters, ruined cities, volatile planetary surfaces, and guerrilla campaigns that exploited hazards rather than avoided them. Simultaneously, a darker idea circulated among adversary planners: forge Deathworlders by artificially exposing other species to punishing environments to cultivate similar adaptation. That possibility prompted ethical debates. Should institutions deliberately harden soldiers by exposing them to trauma? Anthropologists and xenobiologists launched field studies to determine whether the cadets were anomalies or representative of broader human resilience. The Academy's leadership recognized the urgency. Doctrines needed review, and the coalition had to prepare for opponents who did not play by familiar rules. The lesson was not only tactical, it was institutional humility. For 10,000 years, assumptions had guided preparation. Now they had to recalibrate a worldview. The cultural and doctrinal ripples from the test spread quickly through the Academy and across coalition halls. Training traditions did more than teach technique. They encoded species values and expectations. The Krillians prized direct aggression. The Vexorans prized deliberate calculation. Humans, newly integrated, offered a hybrid, improvisation fused with ruthless pragmatism. That hybrid challenged how instructors constructed modules. Simulations once tailored tightly to species-specific limits were reworked to emphasize chaotic, unpredictable variables that rewarded creative thinking rather than rote responses. Zero-G courses adopted irregular patterns that favored candidates who could dance through space. Urban warfare modules included collapsing structures, collapsing civilians, and moving timelines that forced split-second improvisation. The Academy's curriculum committee drafted experiments pairing humans with species that offered complementary strengths. Heavy support units to stabilize environments, cyber specialists to neutralize hostile AI, and psychological liaisons to manage civilian evacuations. Political officers watched the discussions with equal intensity. Member worlds debated whether to expand doctrine sharing or restrict tactics that might be exploited by enemies. Some argued to elevate human teams to specialist status. Others warned against over-romanticizing toughness. There was concern about the propagandistic value of human footage. Insurgent groups could emulate the tactics, using rubble and unpredictability against occupying forces. On the human side, researchers pursued biological questions. Were these cadets outliers in their population, or did Earth produce many such survivors? Hospitals recorded microfractures, immune spikes, and indicators of severe physiological strain that humans masked with adrenaline and training. Medical staffs worried about long-term damage and whether the coalition should alter recovery protocols to prevent cumulative harm. Just because humans could endure harsh stress did not mean it left no cost. Ethicists questioned whether training other species to emulate Deathworld conditions would cross moral lines, forge toughness by creating needless suffering. Simultaneously, military planners envisioned constructive collaborations, human-led reconnaissance into chaotic zones, cross-training exchanges to teach improvisational thinking, and integrated task forces that could combine human flexibility with other species' specialized tech. At the strategic level, the Academy's encounter with Elsa and James reframed a basic assumption. Biological diversity did not only mean exotic forms, it meant different ways of solving problems under pressure. The coalition's models of conflict, occupation, and resistance required revision. If humans could convert hazards into advantages, then the map of deterrence, alliance, and escalation shifted. The Academy began to accept that surviving Earth had taught humans a practical creativity that could be decisive, if the coalition learned how to use it and, critically, how to protect those who paid the personal cost of that survival. Rumors spread that humanity's presence might change the balance of power in subtle but systemic ways. If humans could adapt fluidly to environmental chaos, occupying armies would encounter guerrilla strategies that weaponized terrain and improvisation. Civilians could rapidly mobilize into improvised defense networks, collapsing conventional battle plans designed around predictable behavior. Vax Thor's private warning, that the galaxy should hope humanity remained an ally, circulated quietly among senior planners. Policy debates followed. Some voices urged formal integration, pairing human squads with species specializing in area denial, electronic warfare, and heavy support. Others cautioned about strategic over-reliance. If planners assumed human infallibility, they might commit errors in theaters where different tactics were required. Ethicists and political officers raised another thorny issue. Would forcing other species to undergo Deathworld-style conditioning to replicate human resilience be morally permissible? The answer split councils. Meanwhile, the human cadets' immediate trajectory was simple: recovery, choices, and humility. Elsa and James underwent mandatory medical evaluations, their bodies bearing the marks of the crucible: synthetic blood, carbon scoring, microfractures that would need monitoring. They were offered advanced instruction, diplomatic roles, or a return to Earth as trainers. Both declined headline opportunities, preferring to stay at their stations and continue serving in roles where their practical skills were most useful. Their quiet decisions embodied a human ethos: mission over spectacle, work over recognition. The Academy responded structurally. New modules emphasized environmental creativity, psychological resilience, and cross-cultural tactical exchanges. Training that once codified limits now encouraged adaptive thinking. The coalition shifted its posture. Human units were increasingly considered for chaotic theaters, and doctrinal planners sketched protective measures to prevent exploitative experiments by adversaries. At the institutional level, the Academy's experience with the two cadets forced a broader acceptance. Biological difference was not simply a curiosity but a strategic variable. General Vax Thor's closing note, uttered with odd caution, summed the mood. Humanity was not merely another species added to the roster. They had been forged by Earth, and that forging altered the calculus of conflict, alliance, and survival. If the galaxy hoped for stability, it needed to understand the resilient, improvisational force it had welcomed.